So you play in Dynasty leagues, and now we are in the regular season. You scouted your rookies again. You had your drafts. You picked up some free agents. And now you find yourself in season mode. But now is not the time to stop looking towards the future. You need to keep churning that bottom 10% of your roster to make sure that you're prepared for tomorrow. Well, we're here to help tonight on the Rod Pod. It's time to pull up a chair and talk some Dynasty football. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and this is the Rider Dynasty Podcast. With me are my co-hosts, Jameson Hutchinson and Joe Harlow. And tonight, we are going to provide you with the primer for our new in-season format, the Dynasty Debrief. Joe, Jameson, and I will be delivering the real-time Dynasty advice you need to dominate your league today and tomorrow. Jameson?
Yes, sir.
Oh, Jameson. Anyway, we are going to be going live every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you join us and ensure that you have the strongest roster possible. All right, gentlemen, let's kick off the debrief. Wait.
Before you do that, just have to note that that is 1 hour earlier than we have been the past few weeks.
That is true, but are you guys hearing that?
It's Cheeks Tips.
Hey guys, tired of trying to win a trophy yet? Pro tip, just buy one. Nobody knows the difference. JJ, tell the good people how to buy one.
Oh, well, I hate to say it, but Sean is right. Make your league special, or at least convince your coworkers that you are great at fantasy by going to TrophySmack.com and snatching that drip that makes your league mates jealous. Trophy Smack has the best trophies, belts, rings, and even chains to make even your terrible Uncle Jimmy remember to set his lineups this season. After the show, be sure to check out TrophySmack.com and make your championships just a little more special. All right, for this week, I just wanted to kick this off with Jameson, and let's talk some rookies.
Yes, sir. It is my honor and privilege to be looking over our rookies this season. So with that, just kind of figuring out how they settle in during the season, especially playing time. We've got a lot of timeshares. We got a lot of what ifs. We got a lot of news. So just kind of tracking that because, obviously in fantasy football, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So I guess we will just start kicking off with the quarterbacks. We've got 2 quarterbacks that are starting. We got one on IR and JJ McCarthy, and then we've got Drake May, who we will be talking about here probably in a couple weeks when he gets kicked off. But I do want to start in Washington with Jaden Daniels, and I just kind of want to come out and be pretty honest. I'm pretty scared for him. I think that he is a quarterback who is just, I know fantasy-wise a lot of people are excited about him because of his dual threat ability, but he's just one of these guys who, might be stuck in the mud to start and might not ever be able to get out of it. Just the way the Washington offensive line is going to be terrible. No weapons outside Terry McLaurin. And I think, especially this week in week 1, we're going to see that pretty hard with Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles, playing against the Buccaneers, one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. He's going to send the entire house, the FBI, name it, whoever. He's going to send them against Jaden Daniels. And I feel like he might not be able to get the right start and, kind of screws with his career a little bit. Kind of RG3 when he got hurt and, it was nice to begin with. And then, on the other side of it, more exciting portion of it would be Caleb Williams in Chicago, who probably gets one of the best setups ever for a, rookie quarterback. And speaking of them, the Chicago Bears have a 25-point team total this week, one of the highest on the entire NFL slate. So, we're talking Rome Odunze, the rookie, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. Short term, even with Keenan Allen, it sets up nice, but long term, they just extended DJ Moore and just drafted Rome Odunze. So, even long term, dynasty lookout, obviously Caleb Williams sets up really well. So, I don't know if you guys have any more to comment on that. I'd like to hear your comment just real quick on Jaden Daniels and what you guys kind of expect this year from him. Because it seems like some people are really high on him, and I'm pumping the brakes on that.
Well, for me, Jaden Daniels is flying up the draft boards over the past few weeks. I used to be able to sneak him pretty late as a late first round, not first round, like a late top 12 quarterback. But he was sneaking up the drafts at the end, so I didn't get a lot of him. He's going to run a lot. He has a solid arm. I think he probably has more accuracy. I think he's a better passer than Anthony Richardson. So I'm just nervous that he's going to get hit and hurt and won't be able to finish the season. So what I'm really looking for in Jaden, especially in this first week, is how does he take contact? Is he avoiding hits to live to fight another day? Or is he going to drop his shoulder and try to be something that he quite isn't in the NFL? So that's where I am at Jaden Daniels. That's what I'm looking for to figure out in this upcoming week.
Yeah, echoing there. If you've been following us, you know I've never really been a Jaden Daniels guy, at least in this draft process. And I don't really believe in him as a passer. He's accurate, but only to the outsides, is scared to go over the middle of the field, which is really what he's going to have to do in the NFL. Sort of seen a lot of inconsistencies from a Jalen Hurts. Just Hurts has, 50 pounds of muscle on him compared to Daniels. And the offensive line also is absolutely atrocious. Sam Cosmi just got paid and is by far their best offensive lineman, which is
not saying much.
Not great. Terry McLaurin is a really good receiver, but he started to deteriorate already. I mean, he's already 29. Last year, we really saw that he was starting to go downhill. Like you look at reception perception profiles and just other metrics, and he's started to deteriorate. Zach Ertz is a ghost at this point. What's Austin Eckler? And Brian Robinson's probably the second best player on the offense aside from McLaurin. So
Diami Brown?
I was a huge fan of him. Sanat's a fullback, but
no, I know.
And then Cliff Kingsbury has so far through the preseason shown that he's not going to change anything. And if that's the case, he got Kyler Murray beat up. Kyler Murray was on a really good track and then wasn't really helped at all by Cliff Kingsbury at all. And I think I'm stay away from Daniels. I got him in my home league draft on Monday, but he also went in one quarterback league in the 16th round as my QB2. So I was like, all right, well, I'll take a shot. But,
I think that's fair. And I know, Joe, you said you're not like the hugest fan, but this isn't even a Jaden Daniels player take. It just
even
Bryson last year. Some of these guys just end up set up to fail. That's why they're top picks in the draft and all that stuff. But kind of moving forward here, the rookie running backs is very interesting class. We have the workhorse back, who is Jonathan Brooks, who will be on IR. So I mean, we can't even really talk about that. But then the rest of these guys, really kind of like puzzle pieces, trying to figure out how they're going to fit into the offense. So I'm going to start in Buffalo. I'm going to start with JJ Dude and Ray Davis. I think he really has some sweet potential, especially later on. Buffalo, last half of the 2023 season, really started to run the ball when they switched offensive coordinators. And James Cook is a fine running back. He does pretty decent, I guess, as far as the receiving work, but he's got some fumbling issues. Efficiency on the goal line is something that if Ray Davis takes over immediately, if he gets the opportunity and pounces on it, I think it sets him up really well for the rest of the season. I think he could kind of be the kind of switch roles where he ends up being the workhorse back and James Cook ends up kind of the receiving, more gadget player down the line. I think that's what Buffalo initially wanted these past couple of years and just never worked out. Another guy, Marshawn Lloyd, we will see if he plays Friday against the Eagles, but I really like him. Just the way that head coach Matt LaFleur has always ran his running backs. Derrick Henry, we've talked about. Deion Lewis got a run. Josh Jacobs, even though I believe he's only 26, he's got a lot of tread on his tires. So Marshawn Lloyd, I think you can really sneak in, be the lightning to Josh Jacobs' thunder, and kind of be a big playmaker. And be such an upgrade over A.J. Dillon, who we saw last year time and time again have all the opportunity in the world and do nothing with it. So the sooner he plays, he's had a hamstring thing and hasn't really worked, all off season, but he's been one of my favorite clicks. I really do think he's got a ton of upside in this running back group. And then another one that I'm really looking forward to seeing how he gets, kind of put out there is Jalen Wright. So last year, Devon Achane was running back 3 for Miami, and we saw how that ended behind Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. And it kind of seems like Jalen Wright's almost in the same exact spot. He's got 2 people in front of him. Mike McDaniel has talked about just, how they're going to use all 3 of them in different ways. I'm curious to see if he actually gets the run that he does, because when you're with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, there's only so many mouths to feed. And even if they're explosive and, just playing really up-tempo, it still gets really limited. I think he's kind of banking on injury there, but I do think that we can see some early work from him compared to some other guys. And then the last guy I do want to see, and probably my most interested one, who could be the full workhorse here, is Kamani Vidal. If J.K. Dobbins, I'm not believing in. I know he's gotten some rub. He's been injured. We've seen guys, running backs coming off Achilles. It just doesn't happen. And then Gus Edwards, we know who he is. Kamani Vidal coming out of Troy. He's a smaller back, but he's a lot of fun. He can kind of get some 3-down workhorse stuff. And I think that his upside, I'm worried that he might be a late bloomer where Jim Harbaugh just waits and waits and waits until, they can't deny him anymore. But I do think he could be a late round winner as far as the end of the season, where he can kind of sneak in there and get, the most of the work and kind of be the workhorse back for the Chargers there in a scheme that, they're going to run the ball, play action, and try their best to play good defense. But we'll see how that goes. But those are the main guys. There's some others, but I don't think they will have any early, projected volume that we need to kind of keep an eye on. So, and then what we'll do next is we'll go to wide receiver real quick. Unless you guys have any comments on any of my running backs.
Well, I love Ray Davis. I think Ray Davis is more explosive and a better receiver than James Cook. I think he proved that in college. I see him taking the role. And the thing I like best about Jalen Wright, my buddy Doug said it last night on our pod, is that he's the primary backup to both Mostert and Achane. He might not be as explosive as Achane, but he's explosive. And he is a more durable version of Mostert. So I think if he gets a sniff at starting because of an injury to either one, I think we could see him take off. We just need a little patience with him as a rookie.
Right.
Totally agree on Jalen right there. Someone I've been trying to get as much as possible. Do you have to say disagree on the Ray Davis comment? I know James Cook came out as a receiving back. That's what he was most known for, and I think he's one of the more dynamic receiving backs in the league. Now, blocking, it's a little different.
He's also not that explosive in the run game, though, which is what really worries me about. I mean,
he's a weird profile. Like, really good player, but really weird. Really weird. I do think Ray Davis is going to have fantasy relevance this year as like a flex play. James Cook an RB2 weekly, and then Ray Davis a lower end flex 2 maybe.
I think that's fair. I'm very curious to see how Buffalo's offense just works as a whole. And we've got a rookie wide receiver we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I guess we can honestly, we'll just kick off with him, Keon Coleman, and start the wide receivers here for Buffalo. I think he's going to have every opportunity in the world to try to make something happen. I'm just not sure, we're playing Russian roulette and then the gun just doesn't go off. I think that might be a scenario that happens with these wide receivers. So just, it's a little goofy.
Wait, can you give me that metaphor one more time?
Playing Russian roulette where you go spin the round and then the gun goes off, but the gun never goes off. So there's not like a wide receiver one. Everybody's just kind of.
They're all blanks.
Right, but isn't that good if you're playing Russian roulette? Like, you don't want the gun to go off.
But you have the fear or excitement every time.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you, Jameson.
No offense, JJ. Don't expect me to come here with like a very smart, like sophisticated. Just give me my piece.
I was very interested in your metaphor that you were sharing with me. I just felt I got a little confused. It's like when you say like somebody had a lot of tread on their tire. And you mean it in a negative way when that's a positive thing. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to mute myself. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're all good. You get off on mute. But anyways, Keon Coleman, they came out and said they're going to try to play him in the slot, I believe, and that's not his natural position to begin with. So you're kind of fishing. It just seems like a very weird fit to start off with and kind of putting him in the hole. Curtis Samuel, a lot of people have been excited about it. he's not my guy necessarily. And then Khalil Shakir, I think he's a good player. But, as Jody Smith says about Keon Coleman, he just don't work for me, brother. So, Jody, love you. Good seeing you. But, going with some of these other guys, one I'm really excited about is Adonai Mitchell, and I think he walks into a great scenario this week with Josh Downs probably out for the Colts. He will step in right as wide receiver too, and I think he will have every chance to kind of blow the doors off the defense for the Texans. Alec Pierce, just a guy. Just a guy, and I don't think he just kind of runs a lot of miles and doesn't do a whole lot with them. And then, you have Michael Pittman. But I do think there's a scenario that the Texans offense goes off and Anthony Richardson is forced to kind of pass the ball. And if that's the case, we'll get to finally see a peek of A.D. Mitchell and see what he's all about. So he's a guy who, at the beginning of the year, I thought would kind of have to work his way up. But with the injury, I think he walks into a really awesome role. And if he balls out, he'll be there the rest of the way easily instead of having to worry about that. So another guy that I want to talk about is Xavier Legette. It's been my guy all year, even though nobody's talked about him this offseason, and rightfully so. But I just think that he's in a situation, if he can take advantage of it and the profile hits, I think he could hit in a big way. Deontay Johnson will be a target hog. But outside of Adam Thielen, especially if Bryce Young gets in these scenarios where he has to pass the ball if they're playing from behind, I think that he can hit in a big way. But the profile coming out of college, especially as a first rounder, usually doesn't bode well. It's a lot of red in the areas that should be green. But, he had a lot of production his last year at South Carolina with Spencer Rattler behind an offensive line that was one of the worst in the nation. So whether he makes it happen or not is kind of, we'll wait and see. But I do think his profile sets up really nicely if he does hit. And then just a couple more guys. Brian Thomas, I think it might be the missing link for this Jaguars offense, just the explosiveness. I think we'll see him early and often. I don't think he's going to be a guy who will have to be worked into the rotation. I think he will be a player right out of the gate. And then Ladd McConkey is one I've really struggled with just because of the Chargers overall. You can't get a read on him. I like Josh Palmer a lot. I don't want to totally rule out Quentin Johnston, but it's really hard to have any faith, especially seeing the clips and all that stuff. But just a couple of guys outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers, the obvious ones, that I think will get some run, especially early on, and can kind of work their way through. It's kind of opposite of a guy like Jermaine Burton, who seems like he's already in the doghouse from the get-go. So, but just any of these guys stick out for you?
I like Brian Thomas. I think he's in for some big things. I think he's going to be a lot more than I thought he was initially. I think he can run much more of the route tree, so I'm excited for him. I mean, Joe talked about him last week during our bold prediction show, and I have to agree with what Joe said about Brian Thomas.
Yeah, and then I think Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey especially, I think both can be really good. I think both will be really good on the field. It's fantasy-wise, especially this year, I think it's going to be really frustrating for both of them. The Bills, I think, outside of Dalton Kincaid, I think Shakir is going to be pretty consistent. Yeah. Aside from that, I think it's going to be just hit or miss all around. Then Ladd McConkey, health, the offense, he's going to have some really good games. In some games he doesn't do much. I think Josh Palmer's a clear one there since he's been healthy. So
I think that's fair. And then just wrapping up for these rookies, go to tight end. Brock Bowers was a guy I really liked coming out of college, just like everybody else. Just very worried about his spot in Las Vegas with the Raiders offense, who I don't think will be good at all, no matter which quarterback, whether it's Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. And sitting behind Devontae Adams, who's been, they had one of the highest, if not the highest target share in the entire league last year. And I don't think that's really going away. So
and Jacoby Myers, who outproduced Adams.
And I was going to say Jacoby Myers is a great player too. So no, you're good. I'm glad you brought that up. But I like Brock Bowers. I'm worried about him both short term and kind of long term. Raiders haven't had a quarterback in a long time. I guess if you consider Derek Carr one. And I'm worried that the hype and all that just won't be hitting and won't necessarily be his fault. And he's already coming in with a foot issue too. We've seen guys like Antonio Gates back in the day constantly dealt with foot issues. And even though they were great players, they weren't always the most reliable, especially Antonio Gates towards the end. And then the only other tight end I'm keeping a lookout right now has been Sennett in Washington. I'm not buying the Zach Ertz hype train that he's going to get a bunch of work. He was available all last year and wasn't picked up until I think Detroit picked him up before the NFC Championship. He's an old player, tore ACL a couple years ago. I'm going to bet on the rookie who can surely find his way to the field with how bad the rest of the receiving core is. So that wraps up all the rookies that I've got. And unless I think these are just all the guys who will see work kind of at the beginning of the season instead of having to wait until the second half breakout.
All right, awesome, Jameson. So what I'm going to do during the in-season is I'm going to keep an eye on our sophomore players, right? Some flashed during their rookie years. Some did not get that chance. My job is going to be to update you on their status so that you can make moves to get the risers onto your rosters before everybody else and let the rest go to your league mates. So for this week, I just wanted to talk about some players from last year who gave us a glimpse of what might be while we eagerly await like the confirmation of it, right? So if we start with the QB position, we had CJ Stroud pass for over 4,000 yards. He surprised us all with his fantasy performance. And that was about it. That was the only quarterback who really showed up for us last year. Bryce Young struggled behind a terrible offensive line and an even more terrible coaching staff. Will Levis surprised us a little bit with some flashes of brilliance, and then a whole lot of nothing. And Anthony Richardson really shone bright with his rushing ability, and then poof, missed the rest of the year. So for me, this season is all about finding out if that first season was a fluke or a harbinger, right, of what's to come. So, Jameson, do you believe that either Bryce Young or Will Levis have a chance to outperform CJ this season?
I think it'd be really hard just because of the bar that CJ set, but I do think Will Levis can be like right underneath of it. Just the pass rate over expectation, I think it's going to go through the roof with Brian Callahan. And I'm honestly, I know nobody else is in on him, but I think Bryce Young's going to be a lot better this year than he was last year. And I think people have completely written him off because of the situation, even though the weapons aren't the best. I mean, I really like Deontay Johnson before he went over there. Thought he was always underrated in Pittsburgh. And then, like I said, I've liked Xavier Liggett a lot, and I think if he hits, that ends up being a really nice 1-2 punch in Carolina. So I don't think they will perform as much as CJ Stroud just because of his weapons and the bar that he's set. But I do think that they can actually get like right underneath of it. I think that's in the range of outcomes.
I think if Bryce Young and Deontay Johnson are both healthy for this year, I talked about this last night on the pod. Deontay Johnson, I was just over on the Fantasy Points data suite, is the best separator in the league. He wins against every type of coverage, and that's what he needs. They did not have a separator last year. Nobody was open for Bryce Young. And I'm not saying Bryce Young was perfect, but now he's got a shot. Joe, do you think that Anthony Richardson will outperform CJ Stroud?
I think it's possible, just the rushing upside alone. I think CJ Stroud had a lot of luck, isn't the right word at all. He was spectacular, but he only threw 5 interceptions despite being an absurdly aggressive quarterback. One of those things we see with Josh Allen and even Patrick Mahomes, who are in the near dozen interception range every year. I think CJ Stroud probably gets there at some point. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's actually probably good for his on-field product. Want him to be more aggressive because he has that accuracy that not many have. So I think just testing out the arm and those receivers. So I think adding in some of that negative regression, I guess, for interceptions, plus if Anthony Richardson's healthy, I do think he would outscore just the rushing.
Well, that makes sense to me, Joe. So let's check on the running backs now. So Gibbs and Bijan, they both performed well and should be locked in as starters, right? We're not talking about them this year when I talk about sophomores. They're kind of done. But the rest of the running backs did leave some questions. Devon Achane had ridiculous efficiency in an injury-shortened season. Tyjae Spears couldn't get anything started behind a terrible line and the great Derrick Henry. Zach Charbonnet fizzled as the backup to Kenneth Walker. And then we had Roshan Johnson, Chase Brown, Kendre Miller, Tank Bigsby, all had these high expectations as next in line to the current starter. Yet I don't think any of us really walked away from last year going, wow, they have this locked down. I mean, some people are even saying Zach Moss is going to end up as a running back one.
Just saying.
So, Joe,
Starts this week.
Between Achane, Spears, and Charbonnet, who are you most excited to see if they are the bee's knees?
I think it has to be Achane, as we saw elite level upside, but historic level of efficiency in that offense. But yeah, and I loved him as a prospect. As long as they keep his touches to 15 or less, I think he can really explode and be spectacular. I don't think he needs a big workload just with scheme and his talents.
Jameson, looking at Roshan, Chase Brown, Kendre Miller, and Tank Bigsby, who do you think out of those four takes the next step this year?
I think everybody's, easy answer would be Chase Brown. I kind of want to lean into Tank Bigsby a little bit. I know last season was very bad for him, but I think the Jaguars need him, and they stuck with him. They didn't add any, competition for him. And the reports coming out of training camp, we saw last year Travis Etienne fall off the cliff the second half. I know he finished pretty decent as far as playoff goes, but the first half of the year and the second half are just totally different, ways of how it ended. And I just think that Tank Bigsby has a pretty decent role, and I think he can be a really complimentary piece. I also like Roshan Johnson a lot, too. I've never been a Miles Sanders guy. I like Khalil Herbert. He's just been injured a lot, and I think that Roshan Johnson can kind of leak in and get some of that production as well. So I'm pretty much out on Kendre Miller at this point, and I know you wanted me to pick one. I guess I'll pick Tank, but I like 3 out of the 4 pretty well.
To jump in, I still think Roshan's the best running back on the team.
Well, we shall see this year, and that's why we're doing the Dynasty Debrief every week to keep track of who's showing up. Now, at the wide receiver position, we had Puka Nacua blow up and finish as the wide receiver 4 in PPR. Jordan Addison was the only other rookie to finish in the top 24 with his 10 touchdowns. Now, Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, and Zay Flowers all had solid rookie seasons and finished as wide receiver 3s. And then Tank Dell, Josh Downs, and Jackson Smith and Jigba all finish as wide receiver 4s. Now, outside of those top names, and that's a lot of names, I'm going to be watching Dontavian Wicks, Michael Wilson, Marvin Mims, and Demario Douglas to see if they take the next step, while also seeing if Quentin Johnston, Trey Palmer, Jalen Hyatt, and Marvin Mims can jump off that train to bus station. You know what I mean? But, Joe, between Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, and Zay Flowers, all wide receiver 3s last year, who do you think has the best chance to finish as a wide receiver 2 or better?
I think Zay Flowers does. I think he really showed up. I know they used him a lot, very gadgety early on in the year, but as the season went on, they really used him more in a real wide receiver role. They kind of used him very similarly to a Jamar Chase. Not a comparison. He's obviously not that level of talent, or is he just big enough to be that player? But I think we could see a similar usage with some manufactured targets, and he really did show a lot of the big boy routes that we want to see. I think he's the most talented of that group. Aside from Puka, he and versus JSN, I think, are going to be the top 2 receivers from this class this year. I think they'll be closer to Puka than not.
All right. Well, let's finish up with some tight ends. Now, last year was a bit unusual with 2 rookie tight ends having top 12 finishes. We had Sam Laporta as the tight end 1 overall and Dalton Kincaid as the tight end 11. Now, the rest of the class performed just like rookies. We had Tucker Kraft, Michael Mayer, Luke Musgrave, Will Mallory, all recording over 200 yards. Not enough to make me want to draft him this year, but enough to keep my attention. So, Jameson, I know the answer you're probably going to give me, but who do you think has the best year of this next group? Kraft, Mayer, Musgrave, or Mallory?
think this is easily Luke Musgrave. But I think he's the best tight end in the Packers room over Tucker Kraft, obviously. I think Tucker Kraft does a little bit more of the dirty work, and Musgrave gets to run the big boy routes. Mallory is just, I feel like the Colts have thrown every, dart they can at tight end, just haven't been able to hit. Kylan Granson, Jelani Woods, and Mallory just doesn't seem to cut it. And then Michael Mayer, they just drafted not his replacement. I think both of them can be on the field with Brock Bowers. But like I said, if I don't think that Brock Bowers is going to get it done, it's just hard for me to think that Mayer will do it as well. So this will be Luke Musgrave, a high-powered offense. He can catch 5-6 touchdowns just with how well that I think Jordan Love will play this year, and I think he'll be the best bet.
Well, gentlemen, that is all for the sophomores. So, Joe, are you taking us to College Town?
Yep, let's go to College Station. Not yet, but I do like a certain Texas A&M quarterback who struggled a lot this week, but we'll talk about him later. So really what I'm going to be doing a lot as we get into the season is hitting on a few collegiate prospects into the 2025 rookie class to kind of keep stock of what your dynasty picks, your future draft picks might turn into. As we get later into the year, we could touch on some 2026 prospects, like a Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee, Arch Manning. Had to show off a little bit there. Sorry. Ian Bush.
I like the flex.
Hey, some of those quarterbacks are awesome, but we'll get there later in the year. So for right now, I'm going to go a little more high level, talk about 2, 3, 4 for a couple positions prospects. Just these aren't necessarily my top prospects, especially for the quarterbacks, but just the guys who have the most hype right now and names you need to know at this point. So starting with quarterback, the almost consensus top guy right now is Georgia's Carson Beck. Matt Ryan-esque, good presence, solid arm, functional athleticism. He needs to show a lot more just creativity, gets pressure. I think he's super solid. I don't think in this class there is really a guy who can really turn into an all-world talent. But if you want a guy who can be a back-end Pro Bowler for a few years, Beck seems like one of those guys who could be that. Shedeur Sanders, Dion's kid with Colorado, is the next name up. I know they mentioned it on the New York NFL Stock Exchange, Trevor Sikkema, that Teddy Bridgewater was the comp for him. And I like it a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense. And remember, Teddy was a first-round pick. He was a really good prospect before that catastrophic knee injury in Vikings camp, which was like a decade ago now? Just crazy.
It's like yesterday.
Yeah, I remember just seeing that. Ugh. But Teddy, he's a lot of poise. Sanders is super accurate. I'd say he's a limited athlete. His arm strength is fine. He has a very Jaden Daniels situation where he just runs into hits and pressure all the time. So really needs to cut down on that. But I think there is a chance he does turn into QB1 in this class. The last name to hit here is Texas's Quinn Ewers, who probably has the best arm talent, with a couple others later on maybe, but that's why he was as coming out of high school, he was like one of the highest grades that has ever been given before going to Ohio State, then transferring back to Texas. Electric arm talent, super sporadic with consistency, technique, really. He's been hurt a lot too, is really a big thing with him. If he can he's missed at least 2 games each of the past 2 years as a starter. And this time, if he gets hurt again this year with Arch Manning behind him, he might not get back on the field, which would not be good for his prospects for the NFL. He really needs to stay healthy. Another thing with him is he has a great touch, especially deep. He lets his receivers. That's why Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, they were able to make a lot of plays after the catch because of how he was able to dish the ball out. There's another probably 7 to 10 guys I do like at the quarterback position, but a couple guys I actually like more than these 3, but that'll be for later weeks. Any thoughts on any of those guys or anyone else that you're curious about?
I think just the Carson Beck, I think he'll end up being probably the quarterback one, but it's not going to be like the sexy quarter. It's almost like I don't want to compare him to Kenny Pickett, but just like Kenny Pickett coming out of Pitt, there wasn't really a whole lot of exciting
Yeah.
stuff with him compared to, like C.J. Stroud or Anthony Richardson. I just think, he'll be kind of the best of the bunch. But kid from Tennessee's pretty enticing. I feel like there's been a lot of hype on Tennessee, and I think they could probably be a playoff team this year, honestly, if things go their way.
I do think if he was draft eligible, he'd probably be way up there, but he's true sophomore, or redshirt freshman, whatever. But
whichever role it is.
Yeah, I agree. Beck is the safe bet to go to be the first quarterback, but
the only other one who I think will end up being really good is Jalen Milroe. So we'll see that towards the rest of the year. You'll hear his name plenty as Alabama plays, but I think that's really about it for week 1.
Any for you, JJ?
What's college?
Alrighty, let's move on to the running backs.
No, I don't watch college football.
Yeah. I will say with quarterbacks, I have especially 3 other names that I'm really enticed by, but again, we'll get into those later. They have a lot more to prove before we can really put a lot of stock into them. Running back, Ashton Gianti for Boise State is my top running back. Top tier with another guy. He exploded this week against Georgia State with 267 yards and 6 touchdowns. He has the full Madden jukes, trucks, whatever package in his bag. He's a smaller running back, I think 5'8", but still with his built. He doesn't have great long speed, but last year he averaged 4.5 yards per carry after contact, which was first in the nation by a mile. And then last year he also had 43 catches with no drops. So I think this guy really could be the full package. Want to see it a little more against some higher level competition, just Mountain West. Even though I love the Mountain West, some Mountain West ball, there's not the greatest defenses there, so we'll need to see some more from him. Player who has played a lot of good defenses is Quinshon Judkins, formerly of Ole Miss, now with Ohio State. I see in our doc I actually put Ole Miss out of habit there. But he had a good first game. He's powerful, violent, has great vision. He's a limited athlete. He's probably the worst athlete of these top tier running backs, but I think he's a great running back. He was 3-star prospect who ended up with 1,600 yards as a true freshman for Ole Miss. That's why Zach Evans ended up not being anything. He was supposed to be the starter over at Judkins, but then dude turned out to be awesome. Next name, Omarion Hampton for North Carolina, was the only thing Drake May had going for him last couple of years. Hampton's maybe the best athlete. A lot of, not laterally, but straight line. He has great straight line speed, good balance. Had over 1,000 yards last year after contact, but again, struggles laterally. I think he's just more of your north-south runner, which will cause some limitations. But then last name is Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State. A lot of people have him as the running back 1 in this class. I've been a little less in on him. I think he's big, powerful, has a lot of build-up speed. I think he plays a lot like Derrick Henry, but not near that level of talent or specimen, which isn't a slight to Gordon at all. He's just not a Yeti. And the big difference with him and Henry is that he will try to slip around contact a lot more than he should, especially for a 6'2", 220-pound back. Tries to get around it as opposed to just out-muscling people. But then because he's a taller back who runs high, you can get his legs tangled up, get out-leveraged. Yeah, those are the top running backs in this class. Some other interesting ones later on again, but Jameson, you have any thoughts on these guys?
Well, I want to talk about John Emery until he tore his ACL. So I've got
bummer.
That's very frustrating. He looked explosive, speedster for LSU, and then he ended up tearing his ACL in practice. So, but other than that, I think that's about all I had. Like I said, I was going to talk about him. JJ might have something.
Okay, fine.
I have Ashton Gente as is that his name?
Gianti.
Gianti. He is. I have him in a Devy team.
I know you sent me that. I was like, "Oh, you got a good one." I think Gianti and Judkins actually have true first-round grades on right now, which last year did not have any. I think going back, I would have both of them above Kenneth Walker, but not quite Breece Hall level. Again, there's still a full season to play, but that's about where I'm thinking they're going to be.
I like that.
Wide receiver this year, I think, is fun. First name for me, and this is my top receiver, Teteora McMillan from Arizona, who week 1, 10 for 304 and 4. Just not a great opponent, but...
Wait. Did you say 10 for 304 and 4 TDs?
Yeah, I did.
Jesus Christ. College is insane.
And he had was averaged over 17 after the catch in that one. Dude is 6'4", 6'5", 200 pounds, great hands. He's somewhere, as a prospect, he's somewhere between Mike Evans and Drake London, which I think I was talking with my buddy Justin Fry, who also writes and does some potting for IDP Plus, and I think could get to that Marvin Harrison Jr. level of prospect. I don't think he'll quite get there, but he has the potential to get past the Rome Odunze tier for me, and you know how high I was on Rome.
Very.
But yes, yeah, again, great hands. He needs to get stronger within his routes. He's tall and skinny, so he can get pushed around at the top of his routes a lot, but that's really the only thing. He has great after the catch ability. He's not a burner because, I mean, he's massive, but super elusive, again, like Drake London was. Next receiver, Luther Burden out of Mizzou. He's more of the Malik Neighbors mold. I don't think he's not that level of prospect, just he's a little older and not quite as explosive. He also does play a lot like Jamar Chase, except he's kind of slot only. I don't think he has enough physicality to be able to be on the outside long term. But great after the catch, just a sick athlete. Can make plays underneath or just take the top off the defense. But again, we need to see more if he can actually be an outside receiver. So as a slot only is still definitely usable and would be well worth a first round dynasty pick, but just we'll see what the top tier is. There's one other big name wide receiver, but we'll save him for another position. Tight end wise, or I guess do you have any other receivers you're interested in, JJ, or know about?
Just Travis Hunter.
We'll get there.
Okay, we'll get. I figured that's who you were talking about, but I didn't mean to spoil the surprise. But we'll get there.
We'll get there. Tight end wise, there's only one name that's worth talking about right now, and that's Colston Loveland from Michigan. He was really the top target last year, even with Roman Wilson there, and had 8 catches for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns, I think, week 1 with Davis Warren and Alex Orji throwing the ball around a little bit. But I think Loveland, I have him as a top 12 prospect in this class overall. I think I really like his film a lot. He's a 3-level target. He has some chops with blocking, but he's more of your slot tight end that we've seen a lot recently. I think he's a better version of a Dalton Kincaid, basically. And I think he's a true junior, so younger player as well. There's a couple other tight ends, Oscar Delp from Georgia, Luke Lachey from Iowa, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, but we need someone to really separate from the pack. Either of you guys have anything on Loveland or have another tight end you're fond of?
Not on tight ends.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of mid-round guys who are like, oh, they're fun. A lot of Theo Johnson types. Like, oh, that's a fun player. Let's see if anything happens. Now, let's get to the defensive side of the ball. And that's where this is for the IDP degenerates. Maybe the best player in this class is Mason Graham from Michigan, former 4-star, just dominant interior defensive lineman. I think there's a real chance. He's number 2 on my big board right now. He and his teammate, who again we'll get into later, kind of are back and forth for number 1 overall on my board. He's someone who, even though he's a D tackle, is probably worth it. He might end up being the top IDP pick, but Deone Walker is just from Kentucky is a wild case. He is a true nose tackle size, 350, but they play him on the edge and standing up at Kentucky a decent amount, and he looks really natural and fluid there. There's a couple of snaps of him on the edge last year that he dropped back into coverage and was hanging with tight ends. So he's just an absolute freak. I know he was very high on Bruce Feldman's freak list. So he has a lot more to show for like pass rush package, run stopping, but I think he's just a wild prospect who I think can be a lot of fun. Then we'll skip over to the edge rushers where they're are 4 who I think are really fun. Sorry, skipping around me a little bit, JJ. But
All right.
my top edge rusher is James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. He's in the Brian Burns mold of, is he ever going to get to 250? Maybe, maybe not. I think Tennessee has him listed in the 240s right now, but he's probably playing closer to 235, 238, which he has a great rush package. He's a dominant force off the edge. He does play with a lot more power than his size shows, but in the SEC, that will translate a bit more than if it were in the Mountain West, like we talked about earlier. But it is the biggest concern with him. And I know a lot of people knock him because there's just not a lot of power to his game, and there won't be at the next level. There just really can't be. Tennessee has a good strength and conditioning program. So if they're not going to pack more pounds on him, an NFL team's probably not going to get much more out of him there. But just, he's the very Brian Burns, and I'm a huge Burns fan, always have been, players in that mold. So Pierce is my top guy there. And it wouldn't be a Rider Dynasty episode if we didn't talk about a Penn State rusher. So Abdul Carter is now taking over as the top rusher for Penn State. He's been an off-ball linebacker his first 2 seasons with the Nittany Lions, but he's one of those, he has Micah Parsons, number 11, and he looks a lot like Micah. It's weird. And it's not just helmet scouting, but he actually has a lot of that skill set where, yeah, he was a really good linebacker, but he's definitely at home as a rusher. So I think he only had like 100 pass rush snaps over the past 2 years, but those ones, they're dominant reps. And in week 1, sorry, Jameson, he kind of beat the crap out of your Mountaineers, but
No comment on that abysmal game.
yeah.
I've erased it, and I've retired until next year with West Virginia football. It's the same old crap. I'm not going to do it again.
Hey, Drew Aller,
good.
quarterback, looked pretty good for Penn State, so maybe that'll
Yeah.
turn into something.
Garrett Green, the guy who's supposed to be good, did not. So,
Yeah.
like I said, we're retired.
Yeah. But Abdul Carter, I think Dane Brugler and Nate Tice had him at number 2 on their big boards, which is aggressive, but I like it. Again, if he does have shades of Micah Parsons, I think we all see what he's turned into. So Nick Scourton, formerly of Purdue, now with Texas A&M. He's I think a true junior, redshirt junior. He's probably the biggest rusher, true rusher in this class. More of that power style. So he was I think he was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year last year, even though he was with Purdue, or was at least in the conversation. Very technical, powerful rusher. I know a lot of guys, the PFF guys, have him as their top rusher. A lot of love for him. This Notre Dame matchup was tough. Just that whole game was just a rock fight and made the guy who was my QB1 going into the year look kind of not great. But again, later conversation. Then the last name to hit on is Michael Williams from Georgia. A lot of people, I know Jordan Reed from ESPN had him as the top prospect overall. A lot of other people have had him as number 1 prospect going into the year. He's a bigger and more athletic Trayvon Walker. So I think he has more of a plan than Walker did, and more technical refinement than Walker did. And he actually was playing more interior rusher the past year, as opposed to just like an off-ball linebacker. Wrong one. There we go. Damn. Sorry, Jameson.
That's ridiculous, Jody. Me and you will have
Who's
to talk
Jo-
after the show, young man.
Who's Jody rooting for this week?
Obviously not West Virginia. Criminal.
But with Michael Williams, he did unfortunately get injured in the rout of Clemson this week, so we really wanted to see a lot of reps for him just to see what he could turn into, but we're probably not going to get that with I think it was a hamstring strain or a high ankle sprain. So he's going to be a very diminished player for the rest of the year. So that's going to really put a damper on his prospects. Anything on the edge rushers, guys?
I think you covered them.
Cool. Linebacker is a weird position this year. The top guy might not even be a linebacker, and that's LSU's Harold Perkins. If weight was an issue with James Pierce Jr., oh boy, is it with Harold Perkins. He is listed at LSU at 220, which means he's probably 210, maybe.
Jesus.
And he's best as
Get out of here. Come on now.
And Perkins is best off the edge as a rusher. He was dominant there as a true freshman. He played stand-up linebacker for them last year, has a bit this year. It's just, where's he going to be? It's the Isaiah Simmons, the Zaven Collins question. He's not even a tweener. He's just small. Like, where is he going to play? I think he should just be a star. Like, that star box safety, I think, is probably where he comes best at. Be that Antoine Winfield Jr. role, or just causing havoc, blitzing from the safety spots. But we'll see what LSU ends up doing with him. And I just hope he goes to a defensive coordinator who knows what they're doing and can just really have some fun with him. Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma is probably the top true linebacker. Dude is an absolute maniac. Just loves to hit, and I think he's very much just I don't know what the right word to call him. Just trailer trash is too rude, but he's out there. He knows what he is. He is very much about his brand. Just a crazy linebacker. Smaller guy he's not like your traditional linebacker size, but he will go and hit you in the mouth. Then Barrett Carter from Clemson, not someone I'm super high on, probably because I just hate all of Clemson players. If you ask some of my other friends, try not to, but it's kind of how it goes. Smaller backer, he has a lot of hype. So someone to keep your eye on. And do you guys have any other linebackers that you've heard about?
I just want to get to the one cornerback that we will be talking about shortly.
Yes. Let's get to him now. Travis Hunter from the Colorado Buffaloes. Cornerback / wide receiver / returner / quarterback, probably. Who the hell knows? He can do anything. The question with him is he going to be able to play both cornerback and receiver at the next level? Because if he is, he's going to be a fantasy. If he does, he's going to be a fantasy cheat code, especially if you're in a cornerback league like IDP Invitational or something like that. He's going to sneak up very high in those drafts. But he's a really good corner prospect, good receiver. I think he's a better corner than receiver. Do think Dion doesn't put him in the best position. He's more of a zone corner, but the ball skills are clear and obvious. Has great hands. He's a two-way star. So Will Johnson, I think, from Michigan, is probably the best player in this class, up there with his teammate Mason Graham. It's another Patrick Surtain, but and then Ben Morrison from Notre Dame, two outside corners who are going to be dominant. Names to know, but as we talked about, outside corners have a tougher time being fantasy relevant. So it's probably the last we'll really touch on those guys. Then two names to hit on at safety. Then we can get round back to Jameson for some Travis Hunter thoughts. Malachi Starks is the star box safety for Georgia. I think he's not quite a Kyle Hamilton, but if he can clean up some of his angles, he's a great athlete, had an insane interception against Clemson this week. Just sometimes takes weird tracks to the ball carrier. And if he can get those sorted out, I think he's a clear top 5 player in the class. Probably will fall a bit in the draft just because, Kyle Hamilton was the best player in that class and fell to the mid-teens. But yeah, Starks is phenomenal. Then Kevin Winston Jr., another Penn State guy, another box safety, guy who will knock your head off. And yeah, those are the main guys. A lot of names there. Sorry. It'll be more concise in the future. I want to give an overview. Not a problem at all.
Jameson, did you have anything you wanted to say about Travis Hunter?
I kind of disagree. I thought he probably ends up a better wide receiver than corner, even though it probably flip-flop. And I was going to see if he thought he was actually going to play two ways or if he was just going to pick one or the other. Because my thought process would be wide receivers where the money's made.
Yep.
So that's probably what he leans into. But, I
agree.
Wouldn't be the craziest thing to see a two-way player in the NFL.
Yeah.
You'll never see a two-way player in the NFL.
Definitely not full-time.
Not full-time, but I think he could. I think it'd be possible. Just not.
See, but then, not to be disagreeable, but I will disagree. So if you're only going to play part-time at each position, then what's the point of even drafting the player? If you're going to draft a player who's a great cornerback, he's going to play cornerback. If he's a great wide receiver, you play him at wide receiver. If you play him at both, then you have a mid player at both. And the NFL isn't a place where you can go both ways.
Yeah.
Like, who was the last player who played offense and defense?
Dion.
Well, right. And was he good at wide receiver?
Yeah.
No.
He was a good wide receiver 3
He's all right.
in the 90s.
When you had a dynasty,
Yeah.
Right.
no
Yeah.
salary cap. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't think in today's day and age, like, I don't think you're ever going to see a two-way player.
I do think we'll see the team who drafts him. I think they'll try it out, but I don't think it'll last very long. And I do think he's a better cornerback prospect than a wide receiver prospect, but I agree if and when he picks one, it'll be receiver. I think like
If
wide
his
receiver 25 is the same salary as like cornerback 2, so
If his agent allows him to play both ways while being paid for one position, he should fire his agent.
yeah.
Right? Because he's not getting
Yeah.
paid to play two positions. He's going to be getting the rookie slot for one.
Mm-hmm. God, can you imagine I wonder what his contract would look like if it was the pre-rookie salary cap days.
Like the Matt Stafford, Sam Bradford,
Oh,
back up the Brinks truck and like
Oh,
bring
yeah.
3 of them behind him.
yep.
What did they get? $7 million a year?
Something like that.
If that.
Not that big of a Brinks truck anymore.
No. But I'm just very interested to see what will happen there. But it's like I could see him being a wide receiver 2 in the league and then a cornerback 3 or 4, but at that point, is it really worth it? I agree. So I do think a team will try, and that'll be part of it. But just to see what happens. But
It would have to be like one of the Raiders would
Yeah.
draft him.
I also
try
don't
to
think it
start
makes
him
much
both.
sense for him to be a full-time wide receiver and a part-time corner. The other way around, I could see just like we have a Keyshawn Nixon as a corner, but he's also an elite returner. So
You're right.
it's similar to that, just like get him some snaps, manufacture touches. But I don't know. Super fascinated to see.
Probably
Definitely be
not
interesting.
relatable, but like Terrell Pryor when he was quarterback for the
Mhm.
Raiders and then posted a 1,000-yard season as a wide receiver. No, it's
I think
totally
it's
Not
different
at the same
position.
time.
But yeah, not at the same time. But just maybe if his wide
Mhm.
receiver days don't work out, before I get kicked out of the league, let me try corner. Let's see how this goes.
It'll definitely help the longevity.
Just won't be at the same time, so that totally makes JJ's point valid. So
Yeah.
point for JJ.
Yep.
We're not keeping points tonight. If
I think it's a
we-
fascinating discussion to have. We'll see where he goes. I will say he's my cornerback 3 and my wide receiver 3 in this class. So like,
There you go.
I think he's a legit first-round talent at both.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, it is time for tags where we share any final thoughts and let everyone know where they can find us. Jameson, you're up first.
Over on the Twitter machine, as always, at Jameson Rules. This Sunday, 9 o'clock Central, DFS over at IDP Plus. I will be doing that, answering all the DFS questions you got, praying over your fantasy football team. Whatever you need, I'll be here for you. But other than that, just here every week on the Rod Pod, and that's really about it. Just a little bit of degenerate gambling going on. So,
All right, Joe.
you can find me at Joelo63 on the Twitterverse, tweeting about fantasy stuff, football, which is back in about 15 minutes. And then you can also catch me on idpplus.com, where I am taking over our start and sit article each week for the IDPs. Had 2 names at D tackle, D end, linebacker, and defensive back this week. And that'll go to 3 names per position as we get some data for this year in. So you can find me there.
Very nice. I am at JJ Wenner
Other side. There you go.
on Twitter. Thank you to everybody who joined in. Thank you to Bill and Jody for commenting. Jody, I don't know if West Virginia would score 3 against the Citadel. Thank you to Joe and Jameson for all of their work on the episode tonight. Be sure to tune in next week to the All Out Blitz with Doug Orth as we review the key Week 1 games. They come back on Thursday for another live Rider Dynasty podcast at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we deliver a Dynasty debrief for Week 1 of the NFL. And from all of us to all of you, be safe, be well, and as always, Boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.